Welcome back to another episode of KTM Summer Grill. Today I'm joined by speedcafe.com editor Connor O'Brien and Daniel Herrero, who was on the ground for this year's Repco Bathurst 1000, where finally, at last, Gen 3 was unveiled. Daniel, thanks for coming on board. Just give us your first thoughts of the cars when they finally took the covers off.
Yeah, first thoughts, I like them. They certainly have a presence. They look bold. They look exciting. You know, there was obviously the aim of trying to make them look like the road cars. They certainly do that. They look like big, powerful cars, which is what supercars are supposed to be. It's supposed to be nothing subtle about it. So I like that. I like that we've gone away from the really big wings and end plates. That's going to be an interesting one as well, just in terms of functionally trying to reduce that downforce and take away some of that aero wash problem. I like that the cars are a little bit different. I think everything aesthetically, everything visually about them looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty encouraging, I guess, first glimpse at these cars, right? Like, we've sort of been drip-fed information, and ultimately that's probably been part of the drama and all of this, and the sort of the dissemination of information around Gen 3. And we've got our first look at them on track. We got the first sort of, I guess, listen of these cars as well, at full noise. Adrian Burgess, who's the head of motorsport at Supercars, said, oh, they're not going to be running it at full tilt. And if that wasn't running at full tilt at Bathurst, that's pretty encouraging. All the signs and as far as the outputs, the torques and horsepower figures, they're pretty much parity wise. But yeah, from what we saw on telly, at least from what we were seeing from afar, it looked pretty encouraging, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the general reaction, I think, from fans and drivers and whatnot has been pretty positive, and which is sometimes hard to achieve. But yeah, I think it's been worth the wait. It's been a long time coming, but yeah, it's looks like they've got it pretty well in a good window, and they've still got another 12 months or so to absolutely nail it before it actually kind of gets really proper towards running on track.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of, unfortunately, that's been one of the dramas with Gen 3, hasn't it? Is that, we've been distracted largely by the delays and all the dramas surrounding it. There's been issues with COVID as far as getting parts into the country. It's 3 times that we've had Gen 3 delayed. First, obviously, to 2021, and then midway through next year, and then finally 2023. So it's been a long time coming. There's still a lot of conjecture around the platforms that we're using. Obviously, the Ford Mustang's here to stay. We know that as far as a road car goes. So there is some road relevance there, and it's encouraging that the final product that we've got as we see it now does look a lot like the present road car that we've got. Obviously, we're expecting an upgrade to the Ford Mustang, at least like a facelift of sorts, and the supercar will reflect that. There is still some sort of chat around the Chevy Camaro. Obviously, it's a little bit of a weird one, and it's sort of unheard of, really, for a championship to unveil a brand new chassis and introduce a new manufacturer and model, and yet that car isn't sold down under. But GMSV, who are supporting this, and Chevrolet Racing, as they've started it at the same time, have said, no, it's not about selling Camaros, it's about selling the Chevy brand. Obviously, they've brought in the new Corvette and obviously the new Silverado as well. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? I feel like there is a certain vocal group of fans who aren't about that. That sort of goes away from the, I guess, the origins of the sport, which is touring car racing. It's win on Sunday, sell on Monday. it's an odd situation to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but I think that times have changed. I know like you say, the history of the sport is that, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. I don't think we're there anymore. I don't think we've been there for a long time, to be honest. I think the main thing is that we have cool race cars that produce great racing on track. It's all about the entertainment, and obviously it's great to have the brand affinity, because the supercars is a sport like no other, really, in terms of, you got Holden, you got Ford. Obviously that's changing a little bit now, but But in my opinion, like I love watching F1, but I'm not going to go out and try and buy an F1 car. Like I just, for me, it's all about the racing, and I just think that's sort of a move of the times.
Sure. Daniel, one thing that stood out to me during proceedings at Bathurst this year was obviously that press conference. Outgoing CEO Sean Seamer, yourself involved in a little bit of a fiery exchange of sorts. Just run us through that.
Well, I didn't start it, but I certainly helped it along. It's about the gear shift, and about whether we're going to have a gear stick or paddles, whether they're going to have the drivers still going to have to heel and toe for the downshift, or whether they'll have auto blip. And Supercars, really doesn't want to talk about it. There are forces in the background, I think, that were pushing for, blip and for paddles. I think some of the team owners are probably not quite as indifferent as they state in public. There's certainly a cost-saving aspect if you have auto blip, but Supercars is not really a technology category, and particularly nowadays where you don't have that massive manufacturer support. And obviously we know the cars are sort of facsimiles maybe of the road cars. There's some road car DNA in them, but they're certainly not road cars by any stretch of the imagination. The drivers are important, and my personal view is that I hope they keep something similar to what they've got now, because that helps differentiate the drivers from each other. It's I want to watch someone do the footwork and involve all four limbs. It makes it that's the sport aspect of it. And my personal view is I'm more about the sport than the motor. I appreciate both, but I'd prefer that they keep the gear stick. I'd certainly prefer that the drivers still have to heel and toe, because that's a skill that we really appreciate. And the great irony is that Supercar social media people are still posting these videos of the onboard shots of the footwell, where you see all the fancy footwork that the drivers have to do. I think that's actually something that we need to educate more people about, that this is a lot more intricate than just sitting there in a chair and moving the steering wheel around. I think that's the way to go with it.
I 100% agree as well, because you don't want these things to be easy to drive, right? Like you want to have the skill to like, it's no good if I can jump in there and do what I can see Shane Van Gisbergen doing or something like that. You want to be able to differentiate the good from the bad. And this is a key element of what does do that. And look, it does sound like there is some movement in the direction that I think everyone wants to know. I know Mark Scaife behind the scenes is particularly big on keeping that aspect of it, and he's of course now sort of a key player behind the scenes. So fingers crossed it does end up coming to the outcome that probably 98% of people want it to. Yeah,
it's the ultimate irony in all of this is that there's been so much chatter, from whether that's team owners, drivers, or punters who, have said, I don't want paddle shift, I don't want auto blip, and ultimately it's going to be a technical issue that's probably going to mean that we don't get it, not because of public opinion. We saw with last year with Mark Larkin, that was largely driven, his return was largely driven by all the uproar. This is totally separate. Basically, as far as the prototypes go, they've had dramas with the system that they've got, and ultimately it's going to be too difficult for probably some of those smaller teams if they have any issues with it. So
and that's with the transaxle, isn't it?
Yeah, the transaxle and basically the connection, all the electronics and everything that goes in it with the actuator. So it's a fascinating one, and I don't think we've seen the end of it. I think we're getting close to sort of a decision coming, because Sean Seamer has said that we need to strengthen these engines. I'm not sure that they necessarily do need to strengthen these engines, because they're proven products. The Coyote's a proven product. The LS is a proven product, or the LTR I think they're calling it. But it's based off an LS, and these engines are run in cars all over the world, and they're largely bulletproof.
Well, the GM one is more that one's a bit more started from the scratch, but certainly the Coyote is, very well proven over a long period of time. The GM one, has been a long project for KRE and Triple Eight and those guys. I see what they mean. Like, they can't just sit around and wait till August 2022 before they make a decision. They need to kind of pick and stick with something.
Yeah, ultimately it comes down to, concerns around, over-revving the engine, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking at having auto blip in is just limiting the risk to those engines. So it's a bit of a storm in a teacup in many ways, but it is a big issue to resolve because, like you say, Daniel, it's key in terms of the entertainment, in terms of dividing the good drivers from the not as good drivers. One thing that also came out, obviously, from that weekend was reports that Jaguar might even have an interest in joining Supercars. Jaguar have since come out and said no. We've got no interest in joining Supercars. That was a rumor that's actually been around for quite some time and has been linked to Walkinshaw and Andretti United. BMW was another name which was floated for a long time to potentially join that team under Gen3. They, interestingly enough, did not have any presence at the reveal of the new Camaro and new Ford Mustang.
That being Walkinshaw.
Being Walkinshaw.
Yeah, Daniel, you were there. And I guess that sort of started with a couple of questions being asked, right? You had pretty much every other team there, and then no Walkinshaw drivers.
No, that's right. So there was at least one driver from every team on the grid except for Walkinshaw and Andretti United, and except for Erebus. Now, the latter apparently had some sort of pre-existing engagement. My understanding is that for Walkinshaw and Andretti United, it was a straight up, we're not committed either way at the moment, so we'd rather not be seen to tacitly endorse one or another. So that's interesting. They've been putting out feelers for quite a while for a third manufacturer. Ryan Walkinshaw himself has spoken in some level of detail about what they're looking at. Jaguar's not going to happen. Another one down the track, maybe. I think now for the others on the outside, it's probably more a case of seeing how Gen3 rolls out over the next couple of years. Yeah, for sure. I don't know which way they're probably going to go. You might say Chevy just based on maybe the historical ties with that team. I can't see them aligning with Ford, at least with the products that are currently on the shelf. So yeah, it's an interesting time for Supercars. I'm fascinated to see how these cars race. Like you say, they've got a lot of time to get it right now. They've put a stake in the ground and they've said, okay, 2023 is when we're bringing these cars out, and that's it. And there are a lot of things that I like about these cars. I like that they've taken a lot of the downforce off them. That front splitter. If you get underneath the car on that front splitter, there's not a hell of a lot to it. The rear wing, there's not much to that either. And the talk earlier around the rear wing was that it was going to be used more as a balancing tool for parity. So it's not going to be hugely adjustable. You're not going to have these big sort of side elements on the wings where you can move the rear wing element up and down and create heaps of drag and downforce, which we've sort of had dramas with. So yeah, I guess for you, Connor, what's sort of exciting you the most about sort of the next generation of supercars?
Oh, I mean, it's always exciting, right, when a new generation of car comes in. And for me personally, really exciting to see who hits the ground running best. I mean, we all know that the cream will rise to the top eventually. But as we saw 2013 Car of the Future, Brad Jones Racing were fantastic, really, really strong. That it wasn't until probably 2016-ish, sort of where they started, 2015, 2016, where they started to maybe fall back into the midfield a little bit. But, they absolutely nailed it, and which was cool. Cool to see a different team up there winning races. I'm really excited to see who can hit the ground running, is this the time that a Team 18 can kind of take that next step, or a Grove Racing, or I'm sure, in the end, the benchmark teams will still be the benchmark teams, but there might be a window for some mixed up results for a while. So I'm really excited about that, to be honest.
Daniel, what about yourself? Are you excited about this next generation of car?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm not going to try and make predictions on 2023. One should always refrain from predictions, especially about the future, as they say. I'm just happy that I think taking away the downforce is the key thing for me. They need to be able to race properly. I want the cars to move around a bit. You watch some old footage from a few years ago, and some of that was suspension technology not being as good as well. But you see how much the cars move. You watch them across the top at Bathurst. They kind of, even float a bit in some places. Whereas now they just look so planted. You don't want them to look like they're running on rails. You want to see the drivers, sometimes having to catch big opposite lock. We saw it when they were, taking away driver aids in Formula One, just how good it looked when someone actually had to turn it against the corner at times. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to putting it more back in the driver's hands. The good teams will still rise to the top. You see it in IndyCar, which is, vaguely similar in philosophy, quite controlled, but also little bits of freedom. I think we'll see that in supercars. I just think that the journey to get to the result of the race will be much more entertaining.
Connor, Chevy or Ford, which car do you like the most aesthetically, initially?
To be clear, I'm not, in general, I'm not a GM or a Ford person, but I personally, and this has been quite divisive, I personally like the Ford Mustang, the look of that, but both look good.
Yeah, I think the Mustang looks more race car than the Chevy. The Chevy certainly, if you put the Chevy road car next to the new Gen 3 supercar, they look almost identical. And I think one of the things that's sort of flown under the radar actually is how well the homologation team 888 has sort of incorporated the intakes and the brake inducts on the front grille. Like, it's actually really well done. You sort of see in supercars in the past, they sort of have a generic sort of intake on the front across all the cars, and we've sort of moved away with that with Gen 3, and I like that look. I think I'm more leaning towards the Camaro than the Mustang. What about you, Daniel? Have you got a favourite out of the two so far?
I don't have a real favourite if you talk Camaro versus Mustang. The one thing I will say is that the Camaro presently surprised me. Sometimes these, big American muscle cars look a little bit too much or a little bit sort of rectangular, a bit boxy, but no, I quite liked how the Camaro came up, so that exceeded my expectations. The Mustang looks like a Mustang. It looks good. I don't have a particular preference for which one looks better than the other. I just think they both look good.
All right, thanks for that, Daniel. That concludes another episode of KTM Summer Grill. To find out everything you need to know about KTM, head to ktm.com and stay tuned to speedcafe.com for another episode of Summer Grill tomorrow. As part of this year's KTM Summer Grill, each week KTM is giving away the perfect summer beach pack, which includes an umbrella, cap, gym bag and key holder. To enter the draw, head to speedcafe.com or hit the link in the description below.